It was a cold day in Winterfell. The snow had covered the whole courtyard, but inside the castle something colder was waiting. Not just the weather, but fear. Mr. Lewin had received a raven from King's Landing. No one expected it. Everyone thought Lord Eddard Stark was already gone, but the raven came anyway. The small black bird had a note tied to its leg. When Lewin opened it, he froze. It had Ned Stark's handwriting on it, shaky, rushed, but clear. It was like a whisper from a man who knew death was close. The letter said, "Don't trust everyone around you. Roose Bolton cannot be trusted. Protect Robb. Warn Jon. The real threat is inside the north." Lewin didn't waste time. He ran to Lady Catelyn, who was in her chambers. She read the letter and her face turned pale. Her hands shook, but her voice stayed strong. "Call Robb," she said. "Now." Robb was outside, practicing sword fighting with his direwolf, Grey Wind, watching. He looked proud and fearless, like a true Stark, but when he came inside and read his father's letter, his face changed. "Roose Bolton," Robb said, confused. "He's one of my bannermen. He fought for me at Whispering Wood. He's loyal." Catelyn looked into her son's eyes. Her voice was quiet but serious. "Your father never lied, Robb," she said. "If he sent this, it means something." Robb didn't speak for a moment. He just stared at the letter. A storm was growing in his chest. He had trusted Roose Bolton. He had given him power, armies, and respect. If Bolton was a traitor, it meant danger was already too close. Meanwhile, far in the north, Jon Snow was at Castle Black. He had just come back from a hard journey beyond the wall with Lord Commander Mormont. The cold had numbed his fingers, but when he saw the raven waiting for him, his heart warmed. The message was only for him. It was from Ned Stark, his father, or at least the man who raised him like a son. "Jon, you must be strong. Roose Bolton cannot be trusted. Look after Robb and one day return to Winterfell. The North will need you." Jon read the letter again and again. He couldn't believe it. Lord Stark never sent him personal messages. Why now? Why this warning? He looked out at the wall, at the dark woods beyond, and he suddenly felt something shift inside him. Maybe the real war wasn't just beyond the wall. Maybe it was coming from within their own home. He folded the letter, placed it close to his chest, and knew one thing for sure: winter was coming, but so was betrayal. Robb Stark didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fire in his room, staring at the flames as they danced. The words of his father's letter kept echoing in his mind. Roose Bolton cannot be trusted. He thought about every moment he'd spent with Bolton during the war, how calm the man always was, how quiet, how polite. But now that he thought harder, too quiet, maybe even too careful, he remembered how Bolton always avoided being in the front lines, always sending others to die. "Flayed man keeps his secrets well," Robb whispered, repeating the old words of House Bolton. His direwolf, Grey Wind, growled lowly near the door as if he sensed his master's doubt. That was the thing about direwolves. They could feel what men could not. Just then, Catelyn walked in without knocking. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. "Are you still thinking about the letter?" she asked softly. Robb nodded. "I trusted him, Mother. I gave him command over our men. If he truly plans to betray me—" "He's from the Dreadfort," Catelyn said bitterly. "That house has flayed men alive for generations. Their loyalty is not in blood, it's in fear." Robb stood up, his jaw tight. "I need to move fast. If Bolton is planning something, he won't wait long. But we can't accuse him directly," Catelyn said quickly. "Not without proof. It would divide your army." Robb thought for a moment. "Then we watch him. We follow his every move. And if he slips, we strike." Far away at Castle Black, Jon Snow sat in the mess hall, rereading the letter for the 100th time. Samwell Tarly, his closest friend, sat across from him, watching Jon's face with worry. "You're sure it's from Lord Stark?" Sam asked. Jon nodded. "I know his hand. He wrote this before they took him. What will you do?" Sam asked quietly. Jon looked up, his eyes colder than the northern wind. "If Roose Bolton is planning to harm Robb—" "I can't stay here and do nothing, but you've taken your vows," Sam reminded him. Jon's voice dropped. "I swore to protect the realms of men. Robb is part of that. The North is part of that." Sam bit his lip. "But if you leave, They'll call you an oath-breaker. They'll hang you, Jon. I'd rather hang than let my brother walk into a trap, Jon said without hesitation. But before he could say more, a loud knock came on the hall door. A black brother rushed in, breathing heavily. "Jon, there's a rider! A raven from the south. The king in the north is calling for help. It's urgent." Jon stood up fast. His heart pounded. Back in the south, Bolton sat quietly in his tent, writing a letter of his own. The candlelight flickered over his pale face. He wore his calm expression as always, but something cold lived behind his eyes. His son, Ramsay Snow, entered with a smug grin. "Father," Ramsay said, licking his fingers clean from whatever mess he had just made. "The flayed men are ready. We can strike when you say the word." Rose looked at him with quiet disapproval. "You enjoy it too much. That's your weakness. But I get results," Ramsay said. Rose finished writing and sealed the letter. "The king in the north is smart. He'll start watching us, so we move quietly. No noise, no mistakes. When the time is right, he'll be too blind to see the knife coming." He handed the letter to a trusted servant. "Send this to Lord Frey. Tell him the wolf will howl his last soon." Ramsay chuckled. "Robb Stark doesn't even know we're already inside his walls," but Robb was not blind anymore. That night, he called a secret meeting. Only his most loyal men, Great Jon Umber, Mage Mormont and Galbar Glover. He placed the raven's letter in front of them. "This came from my father," Robb said, looking each of them in the eye. "He believes Bolton will betray us. I need to know where your loyalties lie." The room went silent. Then Jon stood up and slammed his fist on the table. "The Boltons flay men alive. The Starks protect them. My loyalties to Winterfell." The others nodded. Robb leaned forward. "Then we fight smart. No bold moves. No open war, not yet. We bleed out the snake before it bites." And so the real game began, not with swords, but with whispers, spies, and silent eyes in the shadows. The North was no longer united. And no one, not even Bolton, knew how dangerous Robb Stark could become once he stopped trusting. It had been 3 days since Robb Stark read his father's warning. On the outside, nothing had changed. His camp was still busy with soldiers training, bannermen laughing, and horses being prepared for war. But behind the tents, beneath the banners, something new had begun. Spies were watching. Robb had quietly sent trusted men to follow Bolton's every step. Where he went, who he met, even the letters his ravens carried, nothing was to be missed. One of those men was Torrhen Karstark, a sharp-eyed young soldier whose family hated the Lannisters deeply. He had been sent to Bolton's camp as a messenger, but his true mission was to observe. Late at night, Torrhen noticed something strange. Bolton's tent lights were never out, not even past midnight. No voices came from inside, just a steady shadow moving. One night, Torrhen crept closer. Through a tiny slit in the tent flap, he saw Bolton not reading, not sleeping, but writing, and burning the letters afterward. "He doesn't want anyone to know what he's saying," Torrhen whispered to himself. He returned to Robb the next morning with the news. Robb nodded slowly. "He's hiding something. Keep watching. Tell no one." Meanwhile, Jon Snow was facing a different kind of battle. Lord Commander Mormont had called him to his chambers after reading the Raven from the south. "You were called by the king in the north," Mormont said. "Why?" Jon stood tall. "He's my brother." "He's in danger," Mormont's eyes narrowed. "You took an oath, boy. We serve the realm, not our families." Jon clenched his fists. "But if the north falls from inside, the realm will suffer too. If we can't protect each other, what are we even protecting?" There was silence. Then surprisingly, Mormont nodded. "You're not wrong," he said. "But if you leave, you do so without my permission. That means if you return, you'll hang." Jon took a deep breath. "Then I won't return unless I bring back peace." That night, Jon packed his things. Ghost, his white direwolf, followed without question. As they reached the gates of Castle Black, Sam ran after him. "Jon! Please, just stay one more night. Think it through." Jon smiled sadly. "I've done enough thinking, Sam. My brother's fighting a war. I can't sit here in the cold and do nothing." Sam looked down. "Be careful. The world outside, it's crueler than even the wall." Jon nodded. "I know, but I've faced worse." And just like that, he rode out into the storm, into the unknown. Toward the south, back in Robb's war camp, the feeling of tension had grown. Rose Bolton still acted loyal, still offered advice, still smiled in his cold, quiet way. But Catelyn noticed something strange. Rose keeps requesting more men, she told Robb. He says it's for defending the supply lines, but he's sending them far east, away from the fight. Robb frowned. He's building his own army under my nose. The final piece came 2 nights later. One of Robb's scouts captured a Bolton raven before it flew. It was risky, but Robb had ordered it. When Maester Lewin opened the letter, his hands trembled. "It's to Lord Walder Frye," he said. "Rose is promising him the north." If they act together, Robb stood still for a long time. Then he spoke. "Bring Rose to my tent, now." When Rose arrived, his face was unreadable as always. "You called for me, Your Grace?" he asked. Robb didn't waste time. He threw the letter on the table. Rose glanced at it, then looked back up without blinking. "That's not mine." "Don't lie to me," Robb growled. "I know everything now. The secret letters, the men you moved, the way you burned your messages at night." Rose didn't flinch. "What do you plan to do then?" Robb stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You betrayed the North. You betrayed my father. You betrayed me. And now I'm going to make sure every house in the North sees what happens to traitors." Rose gave a small smile. "You still think the game is yours?" "But it's been mine all along." Before Robb could react, Rose threw something small to the ground, a small glass vial. Smoke exploded. Grey wind howled. Robb stumbled back when the smoke cleared. Rose was gone, and now Robb knew the war was no longer about the Lannisters. It was about saving the North from one of their own. Rose Bolton was not just planning betrayal anymore. He was already deep inside it. And somewhere, riding hard through the snow, Jon Snow was coming home. The smoke still hung in the air, thick and choking, when Robb staggered out of the tent. Grey wind growled beside him, his ears high, teeth bared. Soldiers were rushing in from every side. "Where is he?" shouted Lord Carstark, sword already drawn. "Gone!" Robb said between clenched teeth. He vanished in the smoke like a bloody sorcerer. The Raven letter had confirmed it. Roose Bolton wasn't planning betrayal anymore. He had already started it. That night, the camp didn't sleep. Robb called his loyal bannermen into council. The room was tense, eyes sharp, tempers high. "He must have had help," said Mage Mormont. "You don't just disappear into the night without men watching your back." Robb nodded. "Check the guards. Find out who was on duty when he escaped." Lord Umber slammed a jug of ale on the table. "We should march on the Dreadfort itself. Burn their bloody flaying banners to ash." But Catelyn raised her hand. "No," she said calmly. "That's what Rose wants. For us to rush. He'll expect fury. We need to be smarter than him, slower, deadlier." Robb agreed. "We'll send ravens to the northern houses. Tell them the truth. Show them the letter. If they side with Bolton, they'll die with him." He looked each of them in the eye. "I will not let the North be ruled by flayers and traitors. We take it back, inch by inch, house by house." But Roose Bolton was already ahead. He rode like a ghost through the night, fast and silent, until he reached a hidden outpost deep in the woods. There Ramsay Snow waited, sharpening a knife, grinning as always. "Did he take the bait?" Ramsay asked. Roose dismounted slowly, his face calm as ever. "He knows now. The wolf's eyes are open," Ramsay chuckled. "Then we should take his eyes out." But Rose raised a hand. "Not yet. The North is a beast with many heads. If we cut one, the others must be fed lies, fear, division." Ramsay tilted his head. "So we don't kill him?" Rose gave him a cold glance. "Oh, we will. But first, we make him bleed. Not with blades. With isolation." Ramsay's grin stretched wider. "A lonely king is a weak king." Rose nodded. "Exactly." Meanwhile, Jon Snow had crossed the neck, riding fast with Ghost by his side. He stopped only for water and little sleep. Every mile he rode, the more his heart ached. Winterfell was getting closer, but so was the war. On the 4th night, he came across a burned village. Houses turned to ash, bodies still fresh, flayed skin hanging from wooden poles. Jon dismounted slowly. Ghost sniffed the air, growling low. "They did this," Jon whispered. "This wasn't bandits. This was a message." He searched the area and found a survivor, a young girl, hiding beneath a pile of hay, shivering. "Please," she whimpered. "They killed everyone. This is what happens to Stark men who don't kneel." Jon wrapped her in a blanket. His voice was soft but cold. "Who did this?" She looked up with wide, terrified eyes. "A man with pale eyes? And a bastard with a cruel smile." Jon didn't need to ask again. Rose and Ramsay. He looked out at the trees, his grip tightening on his sword. "They're not just traitors," he said to Ghost. "They're monsters. Back at Robb's camp, more news came, and none of it good. House Tallheart has gone silent," Galbard Glover reported. No ravens returned. No scouts made it back, Catelyn frowned. "That's 3 houses already." Robb stood at the map table, eyes scanning the north like a general, but his heart heavy like a sun. "They're cutting off my bannermen one by one, poisoning them with fear, or worse, killing them in secret." He slammed his fist on the table. "If I lose the north, I lose everything." But suddenly the tent flap opened. A voice said, "Then don't lose it." All heads turned. Jon Snow stood at the entrance, snow in his hair, black cloak behind him, and Ghost at his heels. Robb stared, stunned. Then a smile broke across his face, not as a king, but as a brother. "You came," Robb said. Jon nodded. "I had to." They hugged tightly, and for a moment the war faded. Just 2 brothers. Just Winterfell. Catelyn's face softened, but a hint of worry lingered in her eyes. She still remembered what Jon was, and more importantly what he wasn't, but Robb had no doubts. "We need you," he said. "The north is turning into a graveyard." Jon's eyes turned cold. "Then let's wake the dead and burn the traitors." The wolves were together again, but this time they weren't boys playing with wooden swords. They were men, and the north was bleeding, and someone was going to pay in blood. Winterfell had never felt so far from home. Robb Stark stood over the war map, hands clenched into fists. Now that Jon was by his side, the weight felt a little lighter, but the danger heavier. With each passing hour, news came of another bannerman, either disappearing or going silent. "House Hornwood hasn't answered our ravens," Galbard Glover said grimly. "And Deepwood Motte, gone, burned, bodies everywhere." Jon didn't speak. He stood at the edge of the tent, watching, thinking. Ghost sat beside him like a shadow, eyes locked on the flame in the brazier. Robb finally looked up. "They're not just trying to defeat us. They're trying to erase us." Catelyn stepped forward, calm but sharp. "Roose knows you still have loyal houses. He's trying to make them afraid to stand with you. He's cutting out your legs before the war even begins." Robb turned to Jon. "You've seen them, haven't you?" Jon nodded. "What they did to that village." His jaw tightened. "They flayed even the children, left their bodies in the snow like trophies." No one spoke for a long time. The tent was quiet, but the silence was heavy with rage. Then Jon said, "We need to strike back, not just with armies. We need to send a message." Robb's eyes lit up. "Exactly what I was thinking." That night, Jon and a small group of men rode out under the cover of darkness. No banners, no noise. They moved like shadows through the north. Their mission was simple: find Bolton's supply lines. Burn them. Leave one survivor. Let him run back with the story. They struck like wolves in the dark, fast and brutal. One camp was taken down in under 10 minutes. Horses scattered. Tents burned. Men screamed as steel met flesh. Jon himself took out the last man, a Bolton scout who begged for mercy. Jon leaned in close. "Tell your lord this: the north remembers, and the wolves are hunting." He let him live, just barely. Far away in a dark, cold room at the Dreadfort, Ramsay Snow was playing his favorite game, one that involved a screaming man and a knife. The man was from House Serwyn. He had refused to kneel. Now he couldn't even stand. Ramsay wiped blood off his blade, calm as a butcher. "They never last long, do they?" Roose Bolton stood in the corner, watching without expression. "You're wasting time," he said coldly. Ramsay turned, smiling like a boy showing off his artwork. "Fear spreads faster when it bleeds, father." Rose walked forward, looking down at the broken man. "And what happens when fear becomes fury? What happens when Robb Stark stops playing the hero and becomes the wolf?" Ramsay shrugged. Then we flay the wolf too. Rose stared at him. We need the people. We don't rule the North with terror. We rule it by making them believe they have no other choice. Ramsay laughed. They already don't. We're inside them now. And no matter what the Stark boys try, we're 10 steps ahead. Rose said nothing for a while. Then, with a voice like ice, he whispered, Then let's show them how deep this betrayal goes. Back in Robb's camp, the war council had gathered again. Jon stood beside his brother, no longer just a night's watchman, now a warrior, a leader. Our strike worked, Robb announced. The Bolton men are afraid. Some even deserted. The room murmured in approval, but Jon raised a hand. This isn't a full victory, he said. It's just the beginning. Roose will answer soon, and not with soldiers. With something worse. Like what? Asked Mage Mormont. Jon looked at them all. He has allies. Quiet ones, spies, even in your houses. Robb turned to Catelyn. Is that possible? She didn't answer at first. Then she said, The North has always had cracks. Roose is filling them. Robb's face hardened. Then we start sealing them. He looked at his brother. Jon, I want you to lead a second force. Quiet, fast, and deadly. Take men you trust. We'll hit the Dreadfort from both sides. Jon nodded. It'll be done. They clasped forearms like true warriors. Not just brothers, but partners now. Outside the tent, Grey Wind and Ghost sat side by side in the snow. 2 direwolves, 2 Starks, and 1 North and broken. But not yet defeated. But in the woods between them and the Dreadfort, a trap had already been set, and Ramsay Snow was waiting in it. Smiling, the snow fell harder as Jon and his men rode deeper into the woods east of the Dreadfort. The trees grew taller, the sky darker. Ghost padded silently beside them, alert and tense. The men Jon had chosen were the ones he trusted with his life. Old friends from Winterfell, hardened fighters from the Watch, and 2 survivors of Bolton's earlier raids. Their mission was clear. Strike hard, strike fast. Hit the Dreadfort from the flank and draw Bolton's men out, while Robb attacked from the front. But something felt wrong. The woods were too quiet. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of hooves in the snow. Jon slowed his horse. Hold! The men behind him obeyed. They knew the look in Jon Snow's eyes, the same one their Lord Eddard used to have right before everything went to hell. Ghost sniffed the air, then growled. Low and sharp, Jon drew his sword. We're not alone, and then the arrows came, dozens, raining down from the trees like death. The first man went down with a scream, an arrow through his neck. Another fell from his horse. Panic spread. Horses whinnied, men scattered, and steel rang as blades were drawn. Ambush! Someone shouted, but by the time they said it, the real horror began. From the trees stepped figures in Bolton armor, faces covered with leather masks, sewn from human skin. They moved in silence, efficient, brutal. Like they weren't even men. Ramsay's dogs barked in the distance. Their howls were worse than the screaming. Jon fought like a storm. Longclaw moved through the air like lightning, cutting down 1 masked soldier, then another. Ghost tore into a third, blood spraying across the snow, but they were surrounded. Fall back, Jon shouted. Back to the ridge. Only 5 of his men were still standing. The rest were either dead or dying. And ahead, in the mist, a figure appeared, walking calmly like a man out for a stroll. Ramsay Snow. He clapped slowly as he approached, smiling like a child at a play. Well, well, he said. The crow returns, and brings his little friends. How sweet. Jon raised his sword, panting. You knew we were coming. Ramsay grinned wider. Of course I did. I've been waiting. I was hoping Robb would send you. It's more fun this way. Where's Roose? Jon growled. Oh, he's busy writing letters. He loves letters. Me? I prefer knives. With a snap of his fingers, more masked soldiers appeared, dragging 2 of Jon's wounded men behind them. They tossed them to the ground. Ramsay leaned down and whispered to one of them, Do you think your king will care when I send him your skin? Maybe I'll write him a message on it. He drew a dagger, slowly, theatrically, and pressed it to the man's throat. Jon stepped forward. Stop! Ramsay raised an eyebrow. Take me, Jon said. Let them go. You want me? Here I am. For a moment even Ramsay seemed surprised. Then he laughed. Long and loud. Oh, you Starks. Always so noble. Always so stupid. He nodded at his men. Take him. Jon was grabbed from behind. Two masked soldiers wrestled his sword away, even as he fought like a wolf. Ghost lunged, biting one of them in the leg, but another struck the dire wolf with a club. Ghost yelped and collapsed. Jon screamed, but it was too late. They bound his arms and dragged him to the center of the clearing. Ramsay walked over and looked him dead in the eyes. "You should have stayed on the wall," he whispered. Then, to his men, "Flay the rest. Send their skins to Robb Stark. Let's see how the king in the north likes messages written in blood." Jon struggled, but they beat him down. His face hit the snow, and all he saw was red. Back at camp, Robb was preparing the main assault. The attack was to begin at dawn. The Dreadfort would fall, he promised, but as he stood by the war map, a raven landed outside his tent. It carried no scroll, only a piece of skin. Human skin, and a name written in blood. Robb dropped to his knees. Catelyn rushed to his side, but he couldn't speak. His hands trembled. His eyes filled with fire and grief. He looked up and whispered, "He has my brother." He stood, and then with a voice colder than the north itself, he said, "We end this. We burn the Dreadfort to the ground. No mercy." Darkness. That was all Jon Snow saw when he opened his eyes. Cold stone walls. Chains cutting into his wrists. The smell of blood, piss, and rot thick in the air. He tried to move but couldn't. His arms were stretched high above his head, his legs barely touching the freezing floor. Every breath felt like it scraped his lungs raw. Ghost was nowhere in sight. The sound of boots echoed. Then came the whistle. That high-pitched tune. Calm and cheerful. Ramsay Snow had arrived. He stepped into the chamber, holding a torch in one hand and a small knife in the other, twirling it between his fingers like a toy. "Well, well," Ramsay said, smiling. "The bastard of Winterfell in chains. Now this is a family reunion I can enjoy." Jon didn't speak. He stared at Ramsay with the kind of hatred that only brothers of war could understand. Ramsay chuckled. "Oh, don't look so grim. You're going to have a role to play in history, Jon Snow. Your screams, they'll echo through these walls forever." He stepped closer and ran the blade lightly down Jon's chest, not cutting, just teasing. "But I won't kill you. Not yet. That would be boring. I want Robb to come see you like this, broken, bloody, and begging." Jon spit in his face. Ramsay paused. Then he smiled wider. "Good. The fight makes it better." He wiped his cheek and leaned in. "You'll be surprised how quickly it fades when I peel your skin back inch by inch." At Robb's camp, rage had replaced grief. The piece of skin bearing Jon's name still lay on the war table. Blood had dried into the grain of the wood. No one dared to move it. Catelyn stood beside her son, her hand on his shoulder. "Are you sure?" she asked. Robb didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes burned. The banners of the north were being raised, not for a battle, but for revenge. "Ramsay wants war," Robb said. "So I'll give him a storm he's never seen." He turned to Great Jon Umber. "Prepare the battering rams. We march on the Dreadfort by nightfall. No hostages. No prisoners? To the last man?" asked Mage Mormont. "To the last scream," Robb said coldly. Catelyn looked uneasy, but she didn't stop him. She saw something in Robb now. Not the boy who'd once chased snowflakes, but a man stripped of mercy. Ramsay hadn't just taken Jon. He had taken Robb's soul and flung it into fire. Inside the Dreadfort, Ramsay's work had begun. Jon was half-conscious, blood dripping down his arms. He had lost count of the cuts. The pain had become something distant, like a memory. Only anger kept him awake. A guard stepped in. "Lord Ramsay." A raven came. Ramsay took the note and read it. Then he laughed. "Robb's coming," he said. "Faster than I thought." "You see, Jon, you are useful." Jon tried to speak. His throat was dry, lips cracked. "You won't win." Ramsay crouched in front of him. "I already have," he whispered. "You think this war is about the North?" "No, Jon, it's about the message. I flay the heroes. I make people afraid to hope." He stood and threw on his coat. "Prepare the courtyard. Let them see what we've done to their precious wolf." The night fell like a curtain of steel. Robb's army gathered under the shadow of trees outside the Dreadfort. Snow drifted slowly. The silence before the storm. Catapults were in place. Torches were lit. Robb mounted his horse. Grey wind snarled at his side. He looked at his men, thousands of northerners, tired, cold, but burning with fury. "No speeches," Robb said. "You all know why we're here." He raised his sword high, then dropped it forward. "Burn it!" The first rocks flew, smashing into the Dreadfort's outer walls. Fire arrows lit the sky like stars made of flame. The Boltons scrambled. Alarms rang. Screams echoed from inside, and in the center tower Jon heard it. Hope, even through the blood, even through the pain, his heart stirred. "They're coming," he whispered. Outside, chaos reigned. Bolton soldiers tried to close the gates, but Umber men crashed through with fury. Mormonts climbed the walls like wolves. The gates broke. The North had come to reclaim itself. Ramsay stood at the balcony, watching it all unfold, still smiling. He turned to his guards. "Bring the bastard out." And so, as the Dreadfort burned, the flayed banners falling one by one, Ramsay Snow dragged a half-dead Jon Snow into the courtyard, chains clanking, blood dripping onto the snow, and across the battlefield. Robb Stark saw him, his brother, barely alive, but alive, and in that moment, Robb wasn't a king anymore, he was a brother. A Stark and a Storm, get him! He roared and he rode, sword drawn, heart pounding, straight into the fire. Robb rode like death through fire. Bolton soldiers tried to stop him, but grey wind tore them down one after another, his white teeth stained red. Behind Robb, the North charged, a wall of steel, fury, and old vengeance. Inside the Dreadfort courtyard, Ramsay Snow dragged Jon toward a raised wooden post in the center. Jon was barely standing, his face swollen, blood soaking his clothes. Chains clinked around his wrists, his head hung low, but his eyes still burning. "Still alive!" Ramsay stood him up against the post and stepped back, watching the chaos beyond the gates. Robb's men were tearing through the yard like wildfire. His smile cracked. "It's almost over, bastard," Ramsay hissed into Jon's ear. "But not before I make you watch your brother die." Jon raised his head. "You talk too much." Ramsay's grin vanished for a split second. Then he raised his knife. But before the blade could fall, Ghost leapt from the smoke like a silent ghost of war. Jaws clamping down hard on Ramsay's arm. The scream was sharp, real, not Ramsay's usual play. He stumbled back, trying to shake the direwolf off, but Ghost held fast. Blood sprayed. The knife dropped. Jon kicked Ramsay with the last of his strength, sending him down to the ground. At that same moment, Robb burst through the gates, eyes locked on his brother. He didn't stop to swing. He didn't call out. He rode straight toward Ramsay. Ramsay scrambled up, face wild now. No smile, no games, just a wounded animal with nowhere to run. He grabbed a sword from the ground and swung wildly as Robb dismounted and charged. The blades met once, sparks flying, then again. Robb parried hard. Ramsay screamed and lunged. But Robb dodged, turned, and with a full-hearted roar, plunged his sword through Ramsay's gut. Ramsay dropped to his knees, mouth open, blood pouring from his lips. "No more screams," Robb said coldly. Then, one clean slice across the throat. The bastard of Bolton was dead. Jon collapsed before the chains could even be removed. His body gave out, falling into the snow. "Get a healer," Robb shouted. "Now!" Catelyn arrived seconds later, kneeling beside Jon, her face pale with grief and relief all mixed together. "He's alive," she whispered. "Barely." They cut him free and wrapped him in furs, lifting him gently into a cart. Ghost never left his side, licking Jon's hand softly, whining like a pup. As the rest of the Dreadfort was taken, Roose Bolton was nowhere to be found. He had fled, disappearing into the night like a rat, but his house was broken, his men slaughtered, his banners torn down and thrown into the fire. 3 days later, Winterfell stood under grey skies. Snow fell quietly as Jon Snow lay in a bed near the fire, bandages wrapped tight around his chest and arms. He hadn't spoken since they returned, but his eyes watched everything. Robb stood at the window, looking out across the white-covered land. "They'll rebuild the Dreadfort," he said. "Turn it into a prison. For traitors, for flayers, for the ones like Bolton who forget what it means to be of the North. Jon said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, "Rose is still out there." "I know," Robb replied. Jon looked up at him. "I want to find him." Robb turned. "Jon, I need to." "Not for revenge," Jon said, his voice raspy, "but so no other boy wakes up in chains." Robb nodded slowly. "When you're strong enough." "We'll do it together." Jon almost smiled. For the first time in weeks, the fire in his heart didn't feel like rage. It felt like home. Outside Winterfell, the banners of the north waved high. The direwolf once again ruled these lands. The flayed man was gone, but shadows still lingered in the snow. Whispers of betrayal, scars that wouldn't heal easily, and a final truth that both brothers now understood. The North remembers, but sometimes it remembers through blood.